Chosen one. Something's been happening to you that you haven't told anyone about. You catch yourself mid-sentence and realize the words leaving your mouth didn't exist in your vocabulary 6 months ago. You look in the mirror and the face staring back carries an expression you can't quite name, not harder, not softer, but different in a way that unsettles you because you can't control it. People around you have noticed too. They haven't said it directly, but you've seen it, that slight pause before they respond to you, like they're recalibrating who they think they're talking to. And you've been doing the same thing to yourself every morning. Here's the thing, that pause isn't confusion. It's recognition, the kind that happens when someone senses a shift they don't have language for yet. And you've been sensing it too, not as a thought, as a physical event. The way your chest responds differently to situations that used to flatten you. The way anger doesn't climb the way it once did, not because you're suppressing it, but because the thing that used to catch fire just doesn't ignite anymore. Something in the fuel has changed. You haven't announced this to anyone. You haven't posted about it. You haven't even fully admitted it to yourself, because part of you is afraid that naming it will make it disappear. But it won't, because what's happening to you isn't a mood, it isn't a phase, it's structural. Let me tell you what you're inside of right now. In metallurgy, when raw metal enters a furnace, the most dangerous stage isn't when the heat is at its peak. It's the phase transition, the exact window where the metal is no longer what it was, but hasn't yet become what it's being shaped into. It's soft, undefined, vulnerable to every impression. One wrong touch during that window and the entire structure warps beyond recovery. But in the hands of someone who knows the exact temperature, the exact timing, the exact moment to hold steady, and the exact moment to strike that window isn't danger, it's design. That's where you are, right now, today. You're not confused. You're in transition. You're not falling apart, you're being taken apart deliberately, precisely by hands that aren't guessing. Stay with me. There's a verse most people read as poetry, but it's actually engineering. Malachi 3:3. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Notice the posture. He doesn't stand at a distance. He doesn't check in occasionally and walk away. He sits. That's the position of someone who isn't leaving until the work is complete. The refiner sits beside the furnace because the difference between purified metal and destroyed metal is measured in seconds. Pull it out too early and it's still contaminated with everything that was never supposed to be part of it. Leave it too long and it warps beyond use. The timing has to be exact, and the only way to know the timing is to never look away. Think about that. The discomfort you've been carrying, the heat you couldn't explain, the pressure that didn't match any specific crisis in your life. It wasn't random. It was monitored, every second of it, not from a distance, from right beside you. You thought you were alone in this. You weren't. You thought nobody noticed the change happening beneath the surface. Someone did. The one managing the temperature has been watching your structure respond to every single degree, and he hasn't flinched once. The fire wasn't abandoned, it was attended. There's a difference most people never discover. Now here's what nobody tells you about this stage. The reason you can't recognize yourself isn't because something went wrong. It's because the version of you that you memorized, the one built from old pain, old reactions, old agreements with people who didn't see what you carry, that version is melting. And what's underneath it doesn't match the picture you've been holding in your head for years, maybe decades. The disorientation you feel is the proof, not the problem. You've been interpreting this shift as instability, as something to fix, as evidence that you're losing your grip. But metal in a furnace doesn't look stable either. It glows, it bends, it loses every familiar shape. And yet, inside that apparent chaos, something is being reorganized at the molecular level. Old bonds are breaking, new ones are forming. The structure that will emerge has no resemblance to what went in. That isn't destruction, that's refinement. And the fact that you're here, not running from the heat, not numbing the discomfort, not pretending everything's fine while the interior crumbles, tells me something about you that you might not be ready to hear yet. You've been chosen for a grade of fire that wasn't assigned to most people around you, not because you're being punished harder, because the material inside you requires a higher temperature to reveal what it actually is. Take a breath right now, not a rushed one, the kind that tells your whole system, I'm still here, I didn't leave, and I'm not going to. Because what follows is going to change the way you see every fire you've ever walked through. Every single one. You've spent years building something you thought was identity. Piece by piece, experience by experience, you assembled a version of yourself from the materials life handed you. The rejection that taught you to stay small, the betrayal that taught you to stay guarded, the failure that taught you to lower your expectations before the world did it for you. And somewhere along the way, you stopped questioning whether those materials were accurate. You just accepted them as the blueprint. I'm the sensitive one. I'm not good with money. I'm the person people leave. You said these things so many times they stopped sounding like descriptions and started sounding like destiny. But here's what was actually happening. You weren't discovering yourself. You were freezing yourself at the temperature of your worst experiences. The world rewards this. It calls it self-awareness. It calls it knowing who you are. It celebrates the person who can label themselves quickly and definitively, who can say, that's just how I am, without flinching. But the refiner doesn't name the metal while it's still in the furnace. He doesn't stamp it, label it, assign it a category while the heat is still doing its work. Because naming something mid-process is the fastest way to interrupt what the process is trying to produce. Every label you accepted about yourself before the fire was finished became a wall you built around an incomplete thing, not to protect it, to limit it. Here's the thing. Think about the last time you were in a room, a meeting, a dinner, a conversation that carried weight, and something inside you wanted to respond differently than you normally do. Maybe someone challenged your competence, and instead of shrinking the way you always have something in your chest, wanted to hold still and look them in the eye without explaining yourself. But then the old label kicked in. I'm the one who avoids conflict, and you defaulted. Not because the old reaction was true anymore, but because the label was still installed. You were wearing a coat that stopped fitting months ago, and the only reason you hadn't taken it off was because you forgot it wasn't your skin. That's the mechanism. The old identity doesn't stay because it's accurate. It stays because it's familiar. And your nervous system can't tell the difference between what's safe and what's known. It treats them as the same thing. So every time the emerging version of you tries to respond from a new place, the old system pulls you back. Not with logic, with comfort, with the gravitational pull of this is who you've always been. But that gravity is a lie. Gravity holds things down. And what the refiner is building in you was never meant to stay at ground level. Stay with me. There's a reason this matters more than it sounds. Every area of your life that's felt stuck, the finances that plateau, no matter what strategy you try, the relationships that repeat the same cycle with different faces, the career that moves sideways when your capacity clearly points upward. None of it is stuck because of external limitation. It's stuck because the identity operating underneath those areas hasn't been updated to match what you're becoming. You've been running new software on old hardware, and the system keeps crashing, not because the software is flawed, but because the machine it's running on was built for a version of you that no longer exists. Now watch this. The discomfort you've been feeling, that friction between who you've been and who you're becoming, isn't a malfunction. It's the exact moment when the old label starts peeling off the metal, and peeling hurts. Not because something's going wrong, but because you've been wearing that label so long, you confused it with your actual surface. The identity built from wounds, from other people's projections, from seasons that ended years ago but left their language in your mouth, that identity is the dross. Not you, never you. It was always a layer sitting on top of something the refiner put there long before the world got its hands on you. And the fire you've been walking through wasn't burning you, it was burning the name tag. So that when you finally step out of this furnace, nothing that comes out of your mouth about who you are will be borrowed from a season that's already dead. So if the labels were dross and the identity was incomplete, that raises a question you've probably been carrying longer than you realize. What was all that pain actually for? The years that felt disproportionately heavy, the losses that didn't match what you'd done wrong. The seasons where you watched people with half your discipline walk into rooms you couldn't even find the door to. You told yourself a story about it, bad luck, bad timing, something fundamentally broken in the wiring. And that story held because nobody offered you a better one, until now. Because the fire you walked through wasn't random, it was sequential. And every degree was measured by someone who knew exactly what was buried inside you and exactly what temperature it would take to bring it to the surface. Here's what nobody tells you about refining precious metal. Gold doesn't require more heat than iron because it's weaker. It requires more heat because its purity threshold is higher. Iron becomes functional at relatively low temperatures, strong enough, useful enough, ordinary enough. But gold has to pass through multiple fire cycles before it reaches the grade that gives it its actual value. Each cycle strips away a layer of impurity that the previous cycle couldn't reach. The first fire gets the obvious contamination. The second goes deeper into compounds that bonded at a molecular level and disguised themselves as part of the original structure. The third fire reaches the things you didn't even know were there. That's your history, not punishment. Progressive refinement. Your life wasn't hotter than everyone else's because you were being targeted. It was hotter because the material inside you demanded a higher clearing temperature, and the refiner doesn't waste premium fire on common metal. Think about that. Then think about Daniel chapter 3, the furnace and the three men who refused to bow. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't rescued from the fire. They were preserved inside it. That distinction changes everything. When Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace expecting to see destruction, he saw 4 figures walking freely, not burning, not bound, walking. And the 4th looked like something that didn't belong in a furnace at all. Here's the detail that most people skip past. The only thing the fire burned was the rope. Their skin was untouched. Their clothes carried no smell of smoke. The fire was precise enough to destroy what was restraining them without damaging what was real. The restraints burned. The men walked free. That's not a story about survival. That's a blueprint for what's been happening to you. Stay with me. Look back at what you lost in your hardest season. Not with grief, with precision. That relationship that ended, was it your skin or was it rope? That opportunity that closed, was it your future? Or was it a binding that looked like a door? That reputation you couldn't hold together, was it your identity? Or was it a costume the furnace wasn't designed to preserve? The fire didn't take anything that belonged to you. It only burned what was holding you in a posture you were never meant to stay in. And the rage you felt, the confusion, the why me that echoed through every sleepless night, that was the sound of rope snapping. It hurt because you'd been tied so long you forgot the rope wasn't part of your body. Let that land. I need to tell you something personal. There was a season I lost nearly everything. I thought defined me a relationship I'd built over years, a position I'd poured my identity into so completely that when it was removed, I didn't know what shape I was without it. And when the ash settled and the silence hit, I discovered something I wasn't expecting. I was still standing, not barely, not in pieces, standing and lighter, not because I'd gained something in the fire, because what had been pressing down on me for years finally burned away, and I could feel my actual weight for the first time. The heaviness I'd carried wasn't mine. It belonged to the things that were tied to me, and the fire knew the difference even when I didn't. Chosen one. The furnace you walked through had the same intelligence operating inside it. It wasn't blind heat. It was surgical heat, the kind that knows the difference between what's gold and what's attached to gold. And now that the rope is ash, you're standing in a freedom you haven't fully explored yet, because part of you is still bracing for the burn that already ended. The fire did its work. What remains is yours. It always was. And no season that comes after this can take what the furnace itself couldn't touch. Now that you understand what the fire was doing, the next question is practical. How do you tell the difference in real time in the middle of your actual life between what's gold and what's dross? Because the dross doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up wearing a label that says this isn't really you. It shows up feeling like instinct. It shows up feeling like personality. It shows up as the reaction you've had so many times you stopped questioning whether it was authentic or just automatic. And that's what makes this stage so critical. The fire brought impurities to the surface, but you're the one who has to recognize them when they float up. The refiner doesn't do that part for you. He brings the heat. You bring the discernment. And discernment at this level requires a tool most people have never been taught to use. Here's the tool. In metallurgy, when metal is heated to refining temperature, the impurities don't stay mixed in. They rise. They separate from the core material and float to the top where they become visible for the first time. The goldsmith doesn't dig for dross. He watches for it. He lets the heat do the work of separation, and then he removes what surfaces. Your life operates on the same principle. When pressure increases, conflict, financial strain, a moment of public challenge, pay attention to what rises. Not what you think. What rises. The reaction that arrives before your conscious mind has time to filter it. That's the raw data. That's the surface layer showing you exactly what's still mixed in with the gold. Now watch this. There are two categories of response under pressure, and they look nothing alike. The first is what rises fast, the sharp defensiveness, when someone questions your competence, the need to list your credentials before the conversation even requires it, the anger that carries the specific flavor of shame underneath. That's dross. Not because the emotion is wrong, but because it's reactive. It moves before wisdom has time to speak. It's the impurity responding to heat exactly the way impurities do, rushing to the surface, demanding to be seen, pretending to be the main material. The second category is what settles. When the same pressure hits and something in you gets quieter instead of louder, denser instead of scattered. When your breathing slows without you deciding to slow it. When the words that come to your mouth are fewer but heavier. That's gold. That's the real structure responding to heat the way refined material does by becoming more itself, not less. Here's the thing. This isn't theory. This is Tuesday morning. You're sitting across from someone, a colleague, a business partner, someone who holds a piece of your financial future in their hands, and they say something that lands wrong. Maybe they underestimate you to your face. Maybe they offer you terms that insult the value you carry. The old version reacts instantly, explains, defends, overqualifies, talks faster, to fill the space where respect should have been. That's dross responding to heat. The version emerging from this furnace does something different. It pauses. 3 seconds, maybe 5, looks directly at the other person without performing anything. And when it speaks, it offers one sentence, clean, undecorated, carrying the full weight of someone who doesn't need this conversation to go well in order to know their own worth. Then it lets the silence do what silence does when it follows something true. It fills the room. Stay with me. There's a second scenario that tests this at an even deeper level. You receive an opportunity, a contract, an investment, offer a door that opens with impressive speed. Everything logical says yes. The numbers work. The timing seems right. But something in your core doesn't accelerate. It doesn't resist either. It just gets quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar. That quietness is gold responding to heat. It's the refined material doing exactly what it's supposed to do, holding its density while everything around it moves fast. The dross response would be immediate excitement, the rush to say yes before the offer disappears, the fear-driven urgency that mistakes speed for alignment. Gold doesn't rush. It assesses from stillness. And the assessment isn't intellectual, it's structural. Something in your composition either resonates with the frequency of what's being offered or it doesn't. And you've reached a stage in your refinement where you can feel the difference if you're willing to trust the pause instead of the panic. Chosen one. Here's the principle underneath all of it. True identity doesn't need protection. It doesn't tremble when challenged. It doesn't inflate when praised. It doesn't shift shape depending on who's in the room. It simply is quiet, dense, unreactive to temperature because it already survived the furnace that burns away everything counterfeit. What's left after fire doesn't need to perform. What's left after fire just stands there, and everything around it adjusts. That's not arrogance, that's metallurgy. And learning to live from that place, the settled place, the dense place, the place that doesn't flinch. That's the first real skill of someone who's emerging from the furnace with something worth carrying. You now know how to read what rises and what settles. But knowing the difference doesn't eliminate the tension of living between two operating systems at the same time, because that's exactly where you are. The old wiring hasn't been fully removed and the new wiring isn't fully installed. You're carrying both, and the weight of both is what makes this particular stretch feel heavier than anything the furnace itself produced. The fire was brutal, but at least the fire had momentum. This stage doesn't. This stage feels like standing in a hallway where the door behind you has locked and the door ahead of you hasn't opened yet. And the hallway is silent. That silence isn't emptiness. It's the most active phase of your entire transformation. But it doesn't feel active. It feels like waiting. And waiting for someone who's already survived fire can feel worse than burning. Here's the thing. In metallurgy, after the fire does its work, there's a stage called the malleable state. The window where the metal has been heated enough to reshape but hasn't cooled into its final form. This is the most powerful and most dangerous moment in the entire process. Powerful because the metal can now become anything the craftsman envisions. Dangerous because it can also be deformed by anything that touches it with enough pressure. A fingerprint pressed into metal at this stage becomes permanent. Not because the fingerprint was strong, but because the metal was open. And right now, you're open in ways you haven't been in years, maybe ever. which means what touches you in this window matters more than what touched you in any previous season of your life. 3 things will try to reshape you before the refiner finishes his work, and none of them will announce themselves as threats. The first is the expectation of people who knew the old version. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to stabilize their own reality. When you change, the people around you lose their reference point, the version of you. They built their interactions around the version they knew how to predict, manage, or depend on in specific ways. Your transformation disrupts their equilibrium, so they'll reach for the old shape. They'll say things like, "You've changed," with a tone that means change back. They'll remind you of who you were, as if that's who you're supposed to remain. And if you're still in the malleable state when that pressure hits, it can leave a dent that takes another fire cycle to remove. The response isn't argument. It isn't defense. It's silence, the kind that holds shape without explaining itself. Let them adjust. That's their work, not yours. The second force is your own impatience. Stay with me on this one because it's the most subtle. You've been through the fire. You've survived what should have broken you. And now something in you wants to prove. It wants to make a visible move, a dramatic declaration, a bold external shift that matches the internal revolution. But a sword pulled from the furnace before it's ready shatters on the first strike. Not because the metal is weak, but because the cooling process wasn't respected. The space between transformation and deployment isn't wasted time, it's curing time. And curing can't be rushed by ambition any more than it can be rushed by pain. The third force is opportunity that arrives ahead of schedule. This is the one that catches the sharpest people off guard because it doesn't look like a test, it looks like a reward. A door opens. An offer lands. Someone extends an invitation that seems perfectly aligned with who you're becoming, and every logical signal says move. But something in your core hesitates, not from fear, from recognition. You've been refined enough to sense when the timing of an opportunity doesn't match the timing of your readiness. And that sensing, that quiet, almost imperceptible pause, is gold doing exactly what gold does. Holding density when the environment is pushing for speed. Think about David. Samuel anointed him king while he was still a teenager pulling burrs out of sheep wool. Heaven had already named him. The oil was already on his head. But between the anointing and the throne stood over a decade of wilderness tending animals, serving a king who wanted him dead, sleeping in caves, leading men who had nothing left to lose. David was already king by heaven's decree, but his structure wasn't ready for the throne. And if he'd seized it early, if he'd taken any of the opportunities to kill Saul and accelerate the timeline, he would have built his reign on the wrong foundation. The wilderness wasn't delay, it was the malleable state, and David let it finish its work. Let that land. The hallway you're standing in right now isn't punishment for what you survived, it's preparation for what you're about to carry. And the version of you that walks through that next door will carry it without buckling, not because the door was easy to reach, but because the hallway taught you the one thing the furnace couldn't. Patience with your own becoming. So the furnace did its work. The malleable state is being honored. But there's a skill most people never develop, and it's the reason so many walk through genuine transformation and still end up confused about where they actually stand. They can't read their own temperature. They don't know whether the fire is still active, whether the cooling has begun, or whether they're somewhere in between, carrying residual heat that feels like a current flame but isn't. And without that read, they make decisions from the wrong stage. They rest when they should be moving. They move when they should be still. They open doors that belong to a later season and wonder why what's on the other side doesn't fit yet. Reading your own temperature isn't intuition dressed in spiritual language. It's a discipline, and it starts with understanding that transformation doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in phases, and each phase has a specific signature if you know what to look for. Here's the thing. The first phase is low heat, the surface stage. You recognize that something needs to change. You feel the gap between who you are and who you sense you're becoming. But the recognition lives in your head, not your structure. You read about change. You think about change. You can describe the change you need with impressive clarity. But your body hasn't moved yet. Your schedule looks the same. Your relationships carry the same weight distribution. Your money flows in the same direction. The signature of this phase is eloquent understanding paired with zero structural shift. And the danger here isn't ignorance, it's the illusion that understanding is the same thing as transformation. It isn't. Understanding is the furnace door opening. Transformation is what happens when you actually step inside. The second phase is medium heat, the separation stage. This is where things start falling away, and not gently. Relationships that functioned on the surface suddenly can't hold the weight of who you're becoming. Habits that numbed you for years lose their grip without you trying to break them. They just stop working, the way a painkiller stops working when the body develops a tolerance. You feel lonely, but it's a specific kind of lonely. Not the loneliness of being abandoned, the loneliness of being unmatched. The people around you haven't changed. You have, and the gap is growing faster than either side can narrate. The signature of this phase is physical exhaustion paired with unusual mental clarity. Your body is processing the separation while your mind is seeing further than it ever has. Most people panic here. They interpret the falling away as loss. They rush to rebuild what's dissolving. They call back the people who just left. Don't. What's separating was meant to separate. The heat is doing exactly what it was calibrated to do. Stay with me. The third phase is high heat, the phase transition itself. This is where you stop trying to change and change starts moving through you. Your reactions shift before you consciously decide to shift them. Words leave your mouth carrying a weight you didn't deliberately place there. People respond to your presence before you've said anything, not because you're performing authority, but because something in your frequency has been altered at a level that doesn't require announcement. The signature of this phase is external impact without internal effort. You're not pushing, you're not strategizing, you're not rehearsing who to be in the next room you walk into. You just walk in and the room recalibrates. Now watch this. The biggest mistake people make in the high heat phase is checking the temperature too often. In metallurgy, opening the furnace door mid-process lets heat escape. Every time you open it, the metal cools slightly, and the process has to rebuild momentum before it can continue. In your life, opening the furnace door looks like this, asking 10 people whether they've noticed you've changed. Comparing your timeline to someone else's transformation. Measuring internal progress by external results that haven't had time to materialize yet. Scrolling through someone else's visible success while your own restructuring is still invisible. Every one of those actions is a door opened. Every one costs heat, and heat once lost has to be regenerated before the process can resume. Here's the discipline. Set a window, not a day, a season. 90 days of committed presence inside the process without demanding evidence that it's working. 90 days of holding your structure steady while the refiner manages the temperature you can't see. This applies everywhere. The financial shift you're implementing, the relational boundary you just installed, the career transition you initiated from alignment instead of panic. None of these will show surface-level results inside the first 30 days. The metal is still in the furnace, and the furnace doesn't owe you a progress report. Your only assignment in this window is cooperation, not control, not surveillance. Trust that the hands managing the heat have never lost a piece of metal they intended to keep, because they haven't, and they won't start with you. Take a breath here, a real one, the kind that carries no agenda except reminding your body that the fire is monitored, the temperature is exact, and the one sitting beside the furnace hasn't looked away. Not once, not even when you couldn't feel him there. What comes next is what happens when the metal finally cools and the weight it carries walks into every room you enter. The furnace has done what furnaces do. The dross has surfaced and been removed. The malleable state has been honored without rushing. The temperature has been read and respected. And now something is happening that you can feel but haven't fully named yet. The heat is lowering, not because the process failed, because the process is entering its final mechanical stage. And this stage is where everything you've survived becomes something the world can actually encounter. In metallurgy, after purification is complete, the metal enters what's called tempering, a controlled cooling that determines the final properties of the finished material. Not the fire, the cooling. That's what decides whether the blade holds its edge under impact or shatters on the first real strike. And the difference between a tempered blade and a brittle one isn't the quality of the metal, it's the precision of how the heat was released. Too fast and the structure becomes rigid, impressive looking, but fragile at the core. Too slow and it stays soft, unable to hold a functional edge. The cooling has to be exact, just like the fire. Here's what tempering looks like in your life right now. You've come through a season of intense internal restructuring, and instead of another dramatic chapter, what you're entering feels almost ordinary. You go back to your work, you sit in the same rooms, you interact with the same people, and on the surface, nothing has visibly changed. But everything beneath the surface has shifted so fundamentally that ordinary activities now carry a different texture. A conversation that used to drain you just doesn't. A decision that would have taken you 3 weeks of overthinking now resolves in a single sitting. Someone says something that would have triggered a defensive spiral 6 months ago, and you notice yourself simply looking at them, not reacting, not suppressing, just present with a stillness that surprises you more than it surprises them. That's the tempered structure responding. That's authority, and it arrived without announcement. Here's the thing. Real authority never announces itself. It doesn't need to. A blade that's been properly tempered doesn't need to explain its edge. You feel it the moment it's in the room. And the people around you are starting to feel it, whether you've said anything or not. Pay attention to the shifts you didn't initiate. The colleague who used to interrupt you now waits for you to finish. The family member who used to dismiss your input now pauses before responding, as if something in your delivery changed, even though your words didn't. The person across the negotiation table who used to push hard now adjusts their posture slightly when you speak, leaning back instead of forward, recalibrating their approach without consciously deciding to. You didn't demand any of this. You didn't send a memo declaring your transformation. The room is reading something that your structure is broadcasting, and it's responding accordingly. That's not manipulation. That's not performance. That's the natural physics of what happens when someone who's been refined enters a space that hasn't been. Now watch this. The authority you're carrying now operates on a principle that contradicts everything the world teaches about power. The world says authority comes from position, the title, the corner office, the number on the business card. But what you carry didn't come from a position, it came from a furnace. And furnace-forged authority doesn't depend on whether the room acknowledges it. It functions regardless. The person who carries positional authority loses it the moment the position is removed. The person who carries refined authority keeps it in every room, every season, every context, because it isn't attached to a structure outside of them. It is the structure, built in, permanent, untransferable. Stay with me. There's a reason this matters beyond the philosophical. The doors that are beginning to open for you, and some have already started, even if you haven't fully connected them to this process, those doors aren't responding to your resume. They're not responding to your network or your strategy or your carefully worded pitch. They're responding to the frequency of someone who's been through fire and came out carrying a different density. People who hold real resources, financial, relational, institutional, have learned to sense this frequency even when they can't name it. They've been burned enough times by impressive surfaces that cracked under pressure to know the difference between someone who performs readiness and someone who simply is ready. And they can feel which one you are the moment you enter the room. The weight you carry now isn't something you rehearsed. It's something you survived into, and that distinction is worth more in every room that matters than any credential you could frame on a wall. Anointed One. The cooling isn't a come down from the fire, it's the completion of it. What the fire purified the cooling is now making functional. And functional means this: what you carry has stopped being something you survive and started being something you deploy. The blade is holding its edge, and every room you walk into from this point forward will know it before you say a word. The authority is real, the rooms are responding. But here's where most people stall. They feel the internal shift, they sense the weight they now carry, and they still accept the same compensation for it. Not because they don't know their value has changed, because they haven't updated the price tag to match the new material. And that gap between what you carry and what you tolerate being exchanged for it is the most expensive gap in your entire life right now. More expensive than any bad investment. More expensive than any wrong relationship. Because every day you operate from the old valuation while carrying refined material, you're funding someone else's structure with gold-grade energy at iron-grade prices. And the refiner didn't put you through multiple fire cycles so you could hand the result away at a discount. Here's the thing. This isn't about greed. It isn't about demanding more from the world with your fist on the table. This is about a principle that runs through every economy, natural and spiritual. Pure gold costs more than raw ore, not because there's more of it. There's actually less. The refining process removes volume. What remains is smaller but denser, and that density is what commands the premium. The same weight of gold at 99.9% purity is valued radically different from the same weight at 58%. Not more material, more refinement. And your life follows the same economics. You don't need to do more than you're doing. You don't need to hustle harder, stay later, take on extra projects to prove the fire wasn't wasted. You need to operate from the refined version and let the density of what you bring recalibrate what flows back to you. Now, watch this. There are 3 economic shifts that happen naturally when someone begins operating from refined identity, and each one will challenge a belief system you've been carrying since before the furnace. The first shift is moving from selling time to deploying judgment. The old version of you measured worth in hours spent, how long you worked, how much effort was visible, how exhausted you looked at the end of the day. That's the iron economy. It rewards volume. But the refined economy rewards precision. One decision made from the clarity you now carry, one accurate read of a room, one strategic no, that saves 6 months of misalignment. That single act holds more measurable value than 100 hours of unfocused execution. You've already done this without charging for it. Every time a friend called you at midnight for the insight that restructured how they approached their marriage, their business, their breaking point, that was gold-grade judgment deployed at zero cost. That economy is closed, starting now. The second shift is moving from accepting every open door to selecting doors that match your grade. Not every opportunity deserves your presence. That sentence will feel uncomfortable because you've spent years in a scarcity pattern. Take what comes, be grateful. It came, don't ask whether it fits, because what if nothing else shows up? But scarcity is an iron-grade belief system, and you're no longer operating at iron temperature. The refined version assesses fit before saying yes. Not from arrogance, from structural awareness. You now know what happens when gold is placed in a setting that wasn't built for it. The setting corrodes, the gold gets blamed, and everyone walks away thinking the partnership failed, when in reality, the mismatch was there from the beginning. Saying no to what doesn't fit isn't rejection, it's preservation, and it creates space for what actually belongs. Stay with me. The third shift is the deepest. It's the move from proving to choosing. The old version of you walked into rooms carrying an invisible resume, credentials, stacked stories rehearsed, ready to justify your presence before anyone asked you to. The refined version walks into a room already knowing it belongs there and spends its energy on a completely different question. Not, do they think I'm enough, but is this room worth what I'm about to bring into it? That reversal from auditioning to evaluating changes the power dynamics of every professional, financial, and relational interaction you enter. Not because you've become arrogant, because you've stopped confusing humility with undervaluation. Proverbs 25:4 says it plainly, "Remove the dross from the silver, and a smith has material for a vessel." The dross comes out first, then the vessel gets made. You can't reverse the order. But once the dross is gone, what remains isn't raw material hoping to become something. It's refined material ready to be placed where its function generates what its quality deserves. Chosen one. The economics of your life are being restructured whether you cooperate with it or not. The refiner didn't invest this level of fire into your process to watch you hand the result away for less than it's worth. The old price list is burning. Let it. What replaces it won't be something you negotiate. It'll be something the room recognizes the moment you walk in and adjusts accordingly. Not because you demanded it, because refined material doesn't need to demand. It just needs to show up and let its density speak. The rooms are responding. The economics are shifting. Doors you didn't knock on are starting to open with a timing that feels almost engineered. And right here in this exact stretch is where more refined people lose what the furnace built than in any season that came before it. Not in the fire, after the fire. Not when everything was being stripped away. When everything starts being handed back. Because the refiner doesn't just test you with heat, he tests you with reward. And reward is the more dangerous furnace of the two, because it arrives wearing the face of something you've been praying for, and very few people think to bring their discernment into a room that looks like a blessing. Here's what nobody tells you. The moment results begin to materialize, new income, new recognition, new access, new people who suddenly see what's always been there. That moment is not graduation. It's the next exam. And the subject being tested is the one thing that can't be taught by fire alone. Stewardship. The capacity to hold what's been given without letting it alter the structure that earned it. A blade fresh from the forge can cut anything placed in front of it. But if the person holding it mistakes sharpness for invincibility, that blade ends up buried in the wrong material, chipped at the edge, dulled by misuse before it ever fulfills the purpose it was forged for. The edge isn't the problem. The handling is. Stay with me. There are 3 specific threats that arrive after the furnace, and each one targets a different part of your newly refined structure. The first is the return of old faces. People who dismissed you, overlooked you, or quietly exited your life during the fire will begin reappearing, drawn not by loyalty, but by the frequency you now carry. Not all of them come with bad intentions. Some are genuinely responding to something real they sense in you. But here's the test. The discernment you forged in the furnace has to operate with more precision now, not less. Because during the fire, threats were obvious, pain was obvious, betrayal wore its own face. But in this season, misalignment wears the costume of opportunity, and the wrong person at the right table can cost you more than any enemy ever did. Don't let relief lower the gates the fire taught you to build. The second threat is velocity. When results start coming, the temptation is to accelerate, say yes faster, expand wider, build higher, fill every opening that appears. But metal fresh from the furnace still needs settling time. Micro-fractures invisible to the eye can exist in a blade that looks finished, and those fractures only reveal themselves under load. Expand too fast, and the first real impact finds the crack. The discipline here is counterintuitive. Slow down precisely when everything around you speeds up. Not because the opportunities aren't real, because your structure needs to prove it can hold the first weight before the second one arrives. One new responsibility held with excellence is worth more than 5 held with fragility. The third threat is the most subtle and the most dangerous. Forgetting the furnace. It happens gradually. The results keep coming. The new reality starts feeling normal. The memory of fire fades, not disappears, but softens, until one day you make a decision from a place of comfort that you never would have made from a place of refinement. That's the fracture point. Deuteronomy 8 warned an entire nation about this exact moment, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle in, when your silver and gold multiply. Be careful. Don't forget the one who brought you through, not because he needs your memory, because your memory is the structural reinforcement that keeps the blade true under pressure. Here's the thing. There's a discipline I want to hand you, and it's simple enough to practice tonight. Every time a significant result arrives, a contract, a breakthrough, a door that opens with weight behind it, stop before you celebrate. Not forever. 10 minutes. Sit in the silence of that moment and remember the furnace. Not to relive the pain, to recalibrate the posture. Remember what the fire cost. Remember what it removed. Remember what it revealed, and let that memory function as what it was always designed to be, not a wound you carry, but a foundation you stand on. The person who remembers the furnace handles the reward differently than the person who forgot it. And the refiner is watching which one you'll be, not to punish you, to determine what he can trust you with next. Because what comes next, anointed one, is heavier than what you're holding now. And the only people who receive the next weight are the ones who proved they could steward the first one without letting it change what the fire built inside them. There's an image I want to leave you with, and I want you to carry it past this message into every room you enter from today forward. A blade freshly released from the refiner's hand. It doesn't gleam the way decorative metal gleams, polished for display, built to impress from a distance. It carries a different kind of light, The kind that runs along the edge, not because someone buffed the surface, but because the internal structure reached a density that reflects without being asked to. The blade doesn't need anyone to confirm it's sharp. It knows, and everything it touches knows too. That's not arrogance forged in fire, that's identity confirmed by it. And that blade, quiet, functional, carrying no ornamentation that wasn't earned in the furnace, is the most accurate picture of what you're becoming that I can offer you today. You arrived at this message carrying a disorientation you couldn't name. The face in the mirror didn't match the person operating behind your eyes. Reactions you'd relied on for years stopped firing. Words that used to fit your mouth felt borrowed from someone you'd already outgrown. And nobody around you could explain what was happening because nobody around you had been through the specific grade of fire that was assigned to your structure. Now you know. The disorientation was never the problem. It was evidence, the only kind that matters, that the old composition was being dismantled at the molecular level, and something fundamentally different was taking its place. You weren't losing yourself, you were losing what was never yours to begin with. And what remains, what the fire couldn't touch, what the malleable state couldn't deform, what the cooling locked into permanent structure, that is the material you'll build every remaining season of your life on. Here's the thing. The refiner doesn't show you the finished blueprint while you're inside the furnace. That's not cruelty. That's precision. Because if you saw the full picture of what you're becoming while the heat was at its peak, one of two things would happen. You'd either run from the scale of it, or you'd try to skip ahead and seize it before the structure could hold the weight. Both outcomes ruin the blade. Both produce something that looks finished but fractures under the first real strike. The reason you couldn't see was because not seeing was part of the engineering. And now, standing on this side of the fire, carrying a density you didn't have 12 months ago, you don't need to see the full picture. You can feel it. In the way you hold silence without discomfort. In the way you assess rooms before they assess you. In the way your presence has begun doing work that your words used to beg for. Don't go looking for confirmation of what's happened inside you. Confirmation will arrive on its own, through doors that open without your hand on the knob, through people who respond to the frequency before you've spoken a single syllable, through that moment at 3 in the morning when you sit in total quiet and realize you no longer need anyone to tell you who you are. The blade knows the fire. It doesn't need the furnace to remind it. Isaiah 48:10 says it with surgical honesty. I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction, not as silver. Your process was custom. Your fire was specific. And what it produced doesn't exist in anyone else's composition, only yours. Chosen one, the furnace is behind you. What was built inside it walks forward with you into everything that comes next. Stand in that. Let it settle without rushing past it. And if something in this message reached a place deeper than your thinking mind, a place that didn't just hear these words, but recognized them, the way you recognize a language you forgot you once spoke, leave a mark below. Write one line to the version of you that was still inside the fire and didn't yet know what the blade would look like. And if, while listening, a face surfaced in your mind, someone carrying heat they don't yet understand, send them this. Not because it comes from me, because sometimes the right words arriving in the right second can change the way someone sees the flame around them. From punishment to design. From destruction to refinement, from fire to formation.